Hey guys, welcome to Ben Wrenchin. My name is Ben and today I'm wrenching on this 2011 Subaru Forester. Today I'm going to be changing out the front driver's side CV axle. I have a quote from a shop saying to replace the front driver's side CV axle is going to be $386. And I got a new one on Amazon for 75 bucks, so I'm going to be putting that on today. So I'm going to start with jacking it up and getting the wheel off. These are 19mm lug nuts, so we'll get the wheel off and start there. So I started with jacking it up and getting the wheel off, and I wanted to show the first problem that I ran into. So as you can see, the sway bar links are busted. It's like that on both sides. I did get new sway bar links from Moog. I will link these in the description. I like these because they're greasable. They were a little bit more expensive. I'll also link the cheaper version of this in the description. So we'll have to do those too, but first I want to work on the CV axle, so I'm going to get at that first. I need to get this axle nut off. It's a 32mm. I'm going to use an air impact to take that axle nut off. There we go. Next, I'll remove the cotter pin on the castle nut of the lower control arm. And luckily this one's already pretty loose, so it shouldn't be hard to take out. And there we go. Got the cotter pin out. And that castle nut is 19mm. I'll see if I can use my long pry bar to get this off with a short socket. And so with that loose, I just need to separate the lower control arm from the ball joint. I'm going to try a small C-clamp and my longest pry bar. I've got the pry bar wedged on the bracket for the lower control arm. I'm going to try hitting it on the side with a hammer to loosen this up. And I can also try wedging my pry bar under here. And that's just bending my pry bar. To help persuade it a little bit, I'm going to spray some PB Blaster on these threads and up here too. And since none of those are working, I'm going to get an S-hook that you can stick the pry bar through and just knock it off that way. So while I'm waiting for the S-hook that I ordered, I can go ahead and remove these 14mm nuts for the sway bar link. There's one right here and then one on this side of the sway bar. And I'm going to go ahead and use a 14mm long socket. All right, and I've got that loose, but the back side's spinning since it came disconnected. So I can grab that side with some locking pliers, lock down on that. And of course, the whole thing is spinning as I turn that nut. At this point, it doesn't matter if I damage this because I'm going to replace it. So I'll try to grab on there and see if that's good enough. It feels like it might be working. Yeah, there we go. Now it's coming loose. And it's getting pretty tight, so I'm going to back it up the other way. Hit it with some PB Blaster. And now the whole thing's turning again, so I gotta tighten up my vice grips. And for some reason, it is just really super tight. But I can adjust my vice grips and keep trying. There we go, it finally freed up. All right, and there we go. Got it out. So in case you run into that problem too, this is the area of the back of the sway bar link where I had to grab onto with my vice grips. If I grabbed this part, it would still spin inside there. So I can grab this end and turn this threaded shaft. So you really got to bite down on this here, and that'll give you the clamping pressure you need to twist that nut off. So for this one, I'm just going to start with PB Blaster because I'm sure it's going to need it. And since I've got a little bit of extra room to work with on this side, and I've already showed how to take it off without an impact, I'm going to use my impact. And same thing here, I'll back that boot off a little bit and I'll grab my vice grips in the same spot. And as long as they're tight enough, this will come right out. There we go. And with the old one off, I can get the new one on. The sway bar end link that I got is from Moog. It's a little bit beefier than the one that was on there. It's got grease fittings, so I'll be able to grease them up. Hopefully it'll last longer. And so when I put this in, I want this grease fitting to be facing this way so that the top one is facing that way. And so I'll just put the bottom in first and then swing the sway bar up and get the top one in there. And then I can just thread the nut on. and the same on the bottom. And I'll go ahead and leave these loose just because I want to have as much play as I can get. But I wanted to go ahead and connect this because you guys will probably have your sway bar link intact and you won't be running into the same problem I am. And now to get the lower control arm loose, I got this hook. I'll link this in the description. It's made to fit on the lower control arm, and then you can put your pry bar through this hole and use that as leverage to break this loose. I tried a C-clamp and that didn't work too well, so we'll see if this is any better. I'll try a hammer and see if that helps. So my longest pry bar didn't work too well, but my breaker bar does fit into this hook loop. So I'll try my longest breaker bar and see if this is any better. And that's not doing anything either. So it appears this hook is not going to work for me. In defense of the hook, you are supposed to use up to a 7/8 inch thick pry bar, and mine is definitely not that thick. So it's not super surprising to me that it's not working. And before I break my breaker bar trying to do this, I got one more idea. I do have this pickle fork that I've used for ball joints on my truck before. So I've got the pickle fork wedged in there underneath the bracket for the ball joint, and I'll see if I can just hit it a few times and knock the control arm loose. I'll go ahead and take the castle nut off so I can see when it breaks free if it does. I'm going to try hitting on the sides of this control arm again and see if I can break it loose. More PB blaster, and I'll let that sit for a while and then see if I can hammer on it again. And after some PB blaster, I'm going to try the hook and my breaker bar again. And that is just doing nothing. Bad idea number 10 is jacking up this lower control arm and seeing if that breaks free some of the rust that has seized that connection between the ball joint and the control arm. And that's not really doing anything. Try to put my jack right under the brake rotor, making sure I'm not hitting that dust plate. It's probably a better idea to go at it without this pad. So I can hook this ridge of my jack into the slot in the rotor and hope that it wedges in there pretty good. And then lift up from the bottom of the rotor. And now I'll see if hitting this does anything. And I'm fouling up this control arm pretty good, hitting it with a hammer. It's already split on the front, so it probably just needs a new control arm. But I don't want to replace that because then I'll have to get an alignment. So I'll really just see if I can keep trying to knock this loose without splitting this open even more and fouling up this side of it. I'll see if raising this up more does anything. Try the pickle fork again, see what happens. And it's moving. There we go. Finally. All right, I got it separated by jacking the rotor with my jack to lift everything else up. Get the pickle fork in here and pry down on this control arm, bust the connection loose with the ball joint, and finally make the separation between the ball joint and the control arm. So this control arm is definitely busted at the front. I'm sure it's not supposed to have a seam there. I boogered up the side pretty good, hitting it with a hammer. So this control arm may need replaced. I don't want to do that because I don't want to get an alignment done. So what I'll do is I'll replace the CV axle, tighten down the sway bar link, and when I go to reinstall it, just see if that ball joint goes in there, and we'll let the castle nut tighten down and feel smooth. If that's the case, I'm going to call it good and see how it drives, and if not, then I know that I need to replace the entire control arm. So this is a good time to point out that this is how projects go. You go to replace one part, and then you find another part that's bad, and then you find another part that's probably bad and needs replaced as well. But that's how it goes. We'll see what all we can save. We did get new sway bar links out of the deal, and we're going to get a new axle, which we know we needed. The control arm is yet to be determined. I feel like it's going to work fine as long as I can get the ball joint back through here, get the castle nut on and tighten it down. As long as everything looks good, I'm going to see how much a control arm is, and I know an alignment's like $100, so it's not the end of the world if we got to replace the control arm. I just really don't want to do that right now. And so now that my pry bar's bent at about a 20-degree angle, I'm going to see if I can get leverage somewhere to make sure that this control arm is completely loose from the ball joint. Or I could just hit it with my hammer. Wow, okay, what happened there is, once I released the pressure from the control arm and got it freed up from the ball joint, the axle came apart at the seam right there, and some bearings fell out, and part of the axle is still inside the differential. So this right here is the end of the axle, and this busted internally and spit the bearings out onto the floor. And so I've still got part of the axle in the differential, and this part just busted open. So this is a good time to point out a reminder that you always want to have a few safety measures in place. So when the car shifts on you, jack stand could fail. That's why you got the tire underneath. Just in case, I got the wheels chalked so the vehicle doesn't roll backwards. But that was pretty scary. So luckily it just busted internally on that end of the axle, and those bearings came out. I didn't know what those were at first. I had to figure it out, but pretty sure it came from in there. That's not supposed to come apart there, but it did. So the good news is the axle's already out. I just got to get that piece out, which I can put a pry bar behind it and knock that out. But that was pretty weird. I've never seen something like that. So in defense of the shop that quoted this job, this axle really did need replaced. I still don't know how they missed the sway bar links, but I guess it's possible that that failed after the quote was given. So I'll get this axle nut off, and I can get this axle out by swinging this wheel forward. And that is certainly one way to get the axle out. Although I'm not sure it's the proper way. So there we go, we got the axle out. We can get the other piece out of the differential and get the new one installed. So I'll use a smaller pry bar and get underneath the back side of this axle and just knock it out of this differential. There we go, I got it out. So I am gonna grab my catch pan because I don't know if a whole lot of differential fluid's gonna come out. And that's the other side of the axle. So no fluid came out, so I'm definitely gonna check the differential fluid. This seal looks good, so I don't need to replace that, which is good news. And if you're like me and didn't know what the inside of an axle looks like, here it is. So at this point, I'm confident that these bearings came off of these posts. There were 3 posts. 3 bearings came out, and it would make sense that those are right inside here, and that's what allows it to turn freely. And it looks like the failure point was just this boot. So the boot was the only thing holding it together. I'm not really sure. I didn't know that these boots hold it together. I thought it was more of just a cover, but it looks like they do. So be careful if your boot is split. You definitely want to replace your axle, because if that's all that was holding this together, then that's all it takes for this thing to come all the way off. So I guess it's better that this happened here rather than on the road. But now we're ready to get the new axle in. I'll get it unboxed and get it installed. And I got the new one unboxed, and it looks really good. I don't have any complaints about it. It looks like it's pretty good quality. I'll link this one in the description. So I always like to compare parts before I put the new one in. And so I can see that these are the same, especially the ends with these splines that have to connect. I want to make sure that the splines look the same. This bearing housing looks a little different. It actually just looks beefier, so I like that. These baffles look a little bigger than the old ones, especially on this side. This one looks a lot bigger than that one. I think it's going to be okay because the overall length is the same, which is good. These splines look the same too, and it even came with a new axle nut, which is awesome. So measuring from here to here, everything looks like it measures the same. The fact that this one's so much bigger than that one, I don't think matters because the overall length is good. It's even got these cross hatches that the old one had, so I like that. I can tell that this is an exact replacement part. Everything looks good, so I'll go ahead and get it installed. Real quick, I wanted to show this. It's got this purple paint here and down here on this side. So what that means is somebody quality checked all of these parts and they marked it that they checked it. So I like when I see that. That means that there was some kind of quality check before this part made it out the door, and that's always a good sign. And to install the new one, I'm just going to put this side into the differential first. I also need to take off this axle nut before I try to get this in there. And I just need to get the splines lined up, and you'll know they're lined up if this slides in very far. And that slid in pretty easily. So now I'm just gonna get underneath and see how much further I gotta go to get this in there. So anytime I get underneath the car, I like to have at least 2 levels of safety. I did put my jack back underneath the car so that if my jack stand fails, then my jack will catch it, or the tire. And I got wheel chocks too, just in case. So just make sure you're safe anytime you're getting underneath your car. So what I'm doing is putting it in there and trying to go straight back. So I'd really just like to get the splines to catch and then push it in further. And there I can tell it's locked in because I can't turn it anymore, so it's at least caught in the splines, which is good news. From there I can just try to push it in by hitting on the other side of it and hoping that that'll knock it in there. Can also try wiggling it and pushing at the same time. So I can grab it from the other end and push as hard as I can, and that'll knock it in little by little. And I can see it going in further. And that's about as far as I can get it in while I'm underneath it. I can't really get a good grip on it and push because the car is so close to the ground, even with it jacked up. And so what I think I'll do is try something that sounds like a bad idea, but I think it's gonna work. So here's my bad idea. I think I'll put this old axle nut on the end of this and thread it on until it's pretty much flush with the end of the axle. And then I can hit it with a hammer and try to knock it in there. The best thing would be if I could put this on backwards, but I can't do that because those threads are messed up from where you punch that notch in so that it stays on the axle. So if that wasn't already punched in, I could put it on this way. I could do that with the new one, but I don't want to use this and hammer on this before I install it onto the new axle. That may actually be a better idea, but I'm going to try this first. I think this will work. And if I just leave a little bit of extra room, I can hit this with a hammer and it's not going to damage it. So we'll see how well this works. There we go. I could feel it just shift right in there. And now it's locked in. That's great. So that worked well. And the axle nut comes off easily. And now I can get under and see how well it's in there. So I can see that silver lip there, and that is resting up against the seal. So I think that is good. That should be as far in as we need it. And we can test it to make sure that it's locked into place. I can grab this side of it and pull on it. So as I pull on this, it doesn't come out at all, which means that it's locked into place and we're in good shape. One of the things that I noticed as I was down here looking at how to install it is there is all kinds of grease from where that boot split open, and it just kind of flung it all over everything back here and on this side too. So I really should clean all this up, but it looks like way more of a mess than I want to deal with right now. But if your boot split open like mine did, you'll probably have grease all over the underside here, and you might want to clean that up before you move on. It'd be better to do that before you install the new axle. There's a bunch of grease right there where you can tell it was just flinging right out of that rip in the boot. But now we just need to get this side into the axle hub here, and as loose as this is, I think we shouldn't have much of a problem getting that in here. I think the biggest problem is going to be connecting the lower control arm, but I'm going to cross that bridge when I get to it. So I'm still connected at the tie rod, but I think I can just turn this. Yeah, there we go. I got it up in there. And so now I just need to line up the splines and push it through. I can see the end of it here, so I'll be able to tell when it comes through. So I can just kind of move it around a little bit and twist and turn until the splines finally catch. And there we go, I got it through. So there it is. So now I can thread this new axle nut on, just a few threads, so it's still loose, but it's secure on there. And so the next and hopefully the final challenge of this project is going to be getting that ball joint back into the lower control arm. I just need to find a way to pry it downward. And I think this is where my hook is going to come in useful. So I jacked it up quite a bit more, and that's going to help me be able to use this S hook because now I've got more room to push down with. This hook says that you can put a 7/8 inch pry bar through this hole, so I'm going to get one of those and see if that's going to be beefy enough to pry that control arm down. After trying 50 different ways to get the lower control arm back on, I finally figured out what to do. So I used my longest pry bar and that S hook, and I stood on top of it with my foot and then pulled up on the rotor and got it in there. Probably not the easiest or safest or even right way to do it, but it worked. I did disconnect the sway bar link to give it a little bit more play. Not sure whether that did anything or not. I also had to jack it up just about as tall as my jack would go, and that gave me just enough clearance to get this breaker bar in there and step on it and get it down far enough just before it hit the floor and get that ball joint in there. And so now I'll just reconnect this sway bar link and get these nuts back on, and then I can put the castle nut back on the lower ball joint. So now I'm ready to get all these torqued down. The axle nut gets torqued down to 162 foot-pounds, so I'm probably just gonna hit that with my impact at the highest setting. The castle nut for the lower ball joint gets torqued down to 30 foot-pounds, and then it says you can also go 60 degrees past that. So I'm gonna tighten that down to 30 and then turn it until I've got the holes lined up with the notches in the castle nut so that I can get a new cotter pin through it. I'm gonna use a new cotter pin from my Chinesium Cotter Pin Kit, and then I'll get the nuts for the sway bar link torqued down to 28 foot-pounds. And then finally the lug nuts are 90 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna get all that put on, and then I'm gonna check the differential fluid. All right, I got everything torqued down. Everything looks good. I need to check the differential and also attach the sway bar link on the passenger side. So I'm gonna clean up my tools and move the car over here so I can get to the passenger side, and that is where the fill plug for the differential is at. With the sway bar link replaced, I'm done. I really just want to make sure the differential fluid is full. So to check that, there's actually a dipstick on this differential and it's right down there. So I'll pull this out and clean it off and then put it back in so I get an accurate reading. Make sure it goes all the way in and then just pull it back out. So you've got F for full and L for low. And to my surprise, the differential is still full. So that is good news. I don't need to put any differential fluid in. If you need to, you can just use this as the fill hole. Probably just get one of those bendy funnels and get it in there and put some differential fluid in. If you need differential fluid, I would suggest this Valvoline Full Synthetic 75W90. Just top it off if you need to. But mine's still full, so I don't need to add any. So with that, guys, I am finally done with this Forester. I'm going to take it for a drive, make sure everything feels good, but that is all that I'm going to do on this car for now. If you want to see more content in the future on this Forester, make sure you subscribe. I plan on doing some more work on this after I finish a project on my truck. But thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video.